Vexta. What is a Vexta? A street artist, a muralist, an exhibitionist in more ways than one. Tonight, we're going to get close, up front and personal, and expose the woman that is Vexta. So Vexta, where are you based right now?
I'm pretty much based out of a suitcase, but I have an apartment in Tulum and storage scattered around the world.
And
I find myself in Melbourne.
I see. Mm-hmm. And how long have you been living this nomadic lifestyle?
Pretty constantly nomadic for the last 5 years, doing a lot of travel. Left Melbourne, moved to New York. But yeah, traveling a lot, and then took an apartment in Mexico for the last year and a half. And
what's it like spending time in Mexico making art?
Really, really nice. Mexico's been for me a really nice incubator, a place to experiment, do different things. I really wanted to start experimenting with public sculpture and projection animations in particular, and some sound pieces. And I've done all of those things while I've been there, which has been really nice. I found it a little bit more creatively compatible than New York.
Do you find that being in Mexico, obviously there's more space. Mm-hmm. Is that a benefit?
Yeah, I felt like after living in New York for 7 years, I definitely felt like I needed more nature and more space to even just think and have time alone. And there's definitely, as well as physical space to create stuff. Yeah.
So you started doing street art. Would you still consider your work as being street?
I consider myself like an artist who has a background in street art. Being self-taught and learning most of what I do from painting on the street and in empty buildings and teaching myself how to do stuff. I think that aesthetic crosses over into most of what I do, being a little bit DIY, figuring it out, using what's on hand. Yeah.
So I know that you just recently, or a couple of months ago, had an exhibition here in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. How do you find that transition between murals or sort of street-based work to galleries?
I love it. I feel like for me, it's part of the same conversation. Originally, in my career history, I was making work on the street, then was offered exhibitions, had a strong gallery focus for a while, and then shifted to doing bigger work on the street and focusing on that. And they kind of both give you different opportunities. And my gallery work is always you have more time to paint. It's more considered in lots of ways. It's more complex work than perhaps a mural.
I'm very interested in the process to which you go about planning your year, being so nomadic.
Yeah.
How do you plan in advance your exhibitions, getting walls and all of the travel that you do?
It depends. I've had different objectives in different years. I think it was around 5 years ago when I first I decided I wanted to travel a lot and use my work to enable travel for my own personal development, and also understanding, a general idea of humanity and how we respond to public work, and, having opportunities to also investigate mythology in local areas in areas that I went to. Yeah, figuring out what I do and how I do it depends on what outcome I want. So I guess when I first started sort of deciding to focus on traveling for a while, I would pick a place like Mexico, mm-hmm. and then line up numerous commissions, or do a little tour and document it and get funding. So I did that in India, I did that in Mexico, and I did that in Europe. And each year I did one place. And then, other times my travels focused around, spending some time in Australia to maintain what I have going here, and then, spending some more time in Mexico to incubate new ideas.
So are there any negatives to living such a nomadic lifestyle?
Yeah, of course. I think there's negatives. Yeah, there's negatives to everything and positives to everything. Negatives are sleeping in different beds all the time, not being comfortable, not having, having a really small amount of clothing that you're wearing for like 2 to 3 months constantly. It makes you also realize that you don't need a lot of stuff to live life. You don't need to be accumulating.
Well, that brings me on my next question. What are some things
Okay.
that you could not possibly travel without?
Things I could not possibly.
What is in
Yes.
Vexta's suitcase
What's
when
in
she's
my
traveling?
suitcase? Way too many shoes, I'll be honest.
How many are we talking?
I think at the moment maybe of like, I'm gonna say 8.
8.
Could be 9.
Okay.
It's quite a few.
What about tools of the trade?
I always travel with my respirator, always all my favorite brushes, generally some knives, a ruler.
Knives.
Yeah. To cut my triangles and my shapes.
Of course. Do you ever get any trouble going
Yeah.
through customs with
Yeah.
sometimes work-related things or
Yeah, quite
dangerous
often.
stuff?
Yeah, because I just forget, and so I'll have like a Stanley knife in my suitcase and go through the thing, and then be like, Once I remember traveling with replica human skulls, and definitely like got some weird looks, and my bag checked at the X-ray, and then going into El Salvador, I had a few Stanley knives that I'd forgotten about, and they're really strict on like they search everything, so. And they're a little scary because they're there with big guns and stuff. Also traveling with like I was traveling somewhere with a fairly large projector once, and in Dubai they were very confused about why I had this big projector.
So what's the significance of using a lot of these interesting materials like skulls and eggs?
Skulls and eggs. I haven't been my work hasn't been so focused on that lately, but I have always been inspired by memento moris and the idea that by reminding yourself that you're going to die, you will, inspire yourself to live a better life, and being okay with, the idea of death, and therefore it feeds back into the idea of life. So, yeah, I've painted animal skulls, I've collected them and painted on bones. Think like taking something that's usually considered pretty morbid and, making it bright and colourful and attractive is an interesting juxtaposition for what people usually expect.
So I'm really into your vibrant neon colours. How is that a counterbalance to a lot of the more natural things you talk about in your work?
Well, so I originally came to my colour palette from looking at the colours that nature uses to signify danger. So many, many years ago, I started researching like poisonous frogs, poisonous plants that were found in the rainforest, and what, colours there were that was like, a natural signal, and then playing around with those ideas of bringing them into like talking about more natural concepts, I guess, or science and nature concepts. And it just escalated from there. I became, I also like there's something that's super attractive about them that, draws people. I always, find when I'm painting something, people will be like, I love the colors. The colors are great, so I feel like it's kind of like this mechanism to bring people in to examine what you want to talk about with your work.
So would you find a place like Las Vegas appealing?
I've never been to Las Vegas. Maybe. I think if I went with you, for sure.
This is without a doubt true.
We'd have a great time.
Yes, no, I think it's interesting, this sort of play between attraction and repulsion. And like you spend a lot of time in Tulum, which I've been to. We've hung out with
together.
You in Tulum, yes. Yeah. We've hung out all around the world.
We have. Miami, New York, Tulum.
Is there any other places?
Maybe Europe somewhere.
Lots of Sydneys.
Lots of Sydney time, Melbourne.
But I find Tulum's a place where you try to get away from this neon colour.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, this fusion between that attraction, but at the same time it's calm. Mm-hmm. But you also use a lot of geometry. How does that fit into this sort of natural perspective?
Yeah. I think, again, I'm just always attracted to things that can have, two meanings or two sides, or be the opposite of what you expect. Very early on in my work, I started to, I used stencils and small shapes and different, like I remember there was a piece that I did that was like hands turning into like leaves. and using repetition of them to like link different things in that I was, talking about with the work, like two different figurative things or objects on the wall. And then, thinking more about being inspired by like particle physics and thinking about how, essentially we're all connected and the things that make up mass. And so I think I'd already been I'm just really attracted to like a diamond or a triangle shape. So I just decided that would be representative of that in my work.
So I think one of the first pieces I saw of yours was the iconic skeletons pashing.
For those playing in other areas of the world, pashing is kissing.
Yes.
It's very Australian.
But I think, as you just said, it has this this polar opposite situation happening, which is like kind of death and love.
Yep.
But you sort of suggested it in a different way.
Yeah.
In a different time. How do you look back at, say, that period of your early street art period now?
Well, the kissing skeletons were really, really pivotal moment for me, where I didn't know if I even wanted to keep making art. That was really when I started to make work more seriously and consider myself an artist, I guess. And I designed that stencil to paint in London for the Cannes Festival.
Banksy.
Yes. And I was really like, I was grieving for somebody I'd lost. I was like, I'm going to go to London. I'm going to like paint these huge kissing skeletons. And it's either going to be like the start of me having an art career or the end. And I was like, go out with, in a blaze of like, this big imagery. So I turned up to London with that as my little design and painted it in fluorescent yellow and pink, I think. And from that point, I decided that art was something that I wanted to focus on, and it was like a beginning and not an end. So that work in particular is like really personally important to me because it was something that was really personal that I made that also a lot of other people resonated with. But also, it was like the leading point in terms of, it was probably the first like fluorescent thing I really painted as well on a wall, and really led me into the rest of what I started doing.
Do you find that in art, often other artists would imitate your work?
I think, that happens for sure. I think sometimes people are influenced subconsciously, and sometimes people, I'm sure you've had it happen with your own work. I've definitely seen some FROSK imitators out there.
Well, I personally just let it go because I'm very much part of the borrowing culture.
Yeah, true that.
So for me, art is not only what you can get away with, but what you can salvage or find or subvert.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think if, if somebody, a company or something is like, making money from something that you've created, then it's upsetting for the most part. It's like, I'm interested in talking about like copyright and how you deal with that, but then also how do you feel about being somebody who influences other people through your work?
It's interesting for me, or not interesting, but probably unlucky for me that I started in a world where appropriation was a very valid form of art making. But now in the internet era of social media, ownership has changed.
Yep.
In some ways it still remains very acceptable because of the use of memes. Because the idea of copyright and about sharing images is a very relevant currency.
Totally.
However, if you're talking about taking different forms of art and trying to use that as your art, it has taken on a different form, especially now that I'm getting more acclaim. Now more people are looking at what I'm doing. I have to be more specific on how I present my art. But at the same time, it's all about stealing shit, subverting it, and saying fuck you to the corporations that it came from.
100%. I see that. I was just thinking when you were saying that, it's interesting that I feel like, discussions around copyright in a lot in our world creatively has gone from like, who owns like a mural on a wall, or like, all of that kind of discussion to, discussing like sharing images online and like, who owns the rights to share it, and like that person didn't tag me or give me credit, or, it's like we're playing out, say, similar battles in a different format. And I feel like artists definitely, that discussion happens where people want to share their work in social media and then sometimes feel hesitant because, I don't know, like you see stuff just get copied a lot.
Yes, this is true. On one hand, I think that's part of our modern culture because things move so quickly. The cycle of what you see just switches instantly. But yeah, I think I have a lot of problems doing commercial work, for example, because either it's too graphic or it has copyright issues. How do you see your work interacting with commercial collaborations?
For me, when I do, whenever I do a commercial collaboration, I like, firstly, like who I'm working with, the ethics have to align, and also has to be something that I personally am interested in. But I think it's definitely like a value for artists to work in those fields, and especially when you're talking about like ownership of style and design and ideas. For me anyway, there's like an opportunity to create that work instead of having somebody, make it because they put my Instagram on their mood board, They're like, oh, we like Vexta stuff, so let's make it look like that. It's like, why not do it yourself, and then, And it's fun as well. And for me, it like also enables me to have some like more affordable work.
So you've just returned from Aberdeen doing a commercial collaboration with Pure Scott Whiskey, was it? Whiskey?
I just traveled to Scotland. I painted, not in Aberdeen, in the lowlands.
Where did I get Aberdeen from?
I went to Aberdeen afterwards and painted with the good people from New Art up there.
I see.
So, but the Pure Scott was the lowlands.
So I'm interested to see the beginning to end evolution of how a commercial collaboration like you did with Pure Scott unravels. Yeah,
basically they'd reached out to me a few times about doing something. So I kind of had heard of them and knew a little bit about what they were doing, and and the right opportunity hadn't really come along. And then when they asked me if I wanted to go to Scotland and paint the distillery, I'd been talking to some friends about how I wanted to go to Scotland. It was kind of on my short list.
Do you provide them with a sketch? How does it evolve?
That project was like very organic, and they didn't even want to see a sketch. They were like, we trust you to do what you want to do. And I was like, no, I would like to show you a sketch because I want to make sure that, Plus, that's how I work. Like, I want to have a visual, reference for what I'm doing. They contacted me. I said yes, that I would go to Scotland. They also came on board for my immersive dinner, which you came to for my recent exhibition, and provided us with, whiskey for cocktails and stuff, which was really nice, and helped kind of promote and support my event.
That's probably why I can't remember that night.
Yeah, really? Come on. It was a great night.
I think I was there, yes. It was amazing. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah, the immersive dinner was awesome. So that was really nice. Like, I feel like when you work with somebody and it becomes more than just like, come to Scotland and paint a mural, but like that they see other opportunities to support what you're doing and vice versa. So it basically started with like, come to Scotland and paint this, mural, and let's do a limited edition whiskey release, to them being also involved in my exhibition as well. I've painted a few bottles that we're going to auction for charity. We'll probably have a launch event in Melbourne. So it's kind of like grown really nicely.
Would you have a dream collab?
Ooh, would I have a dream collaboration? Yeah, I would love to do like something. I would like to do more fashion and maybe a shoe of some sort.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which one? Left or right?
Just probably the left.
So I noticed you've just done a range of yoga pants.
Yeah.
I think your work lends itself quite well to things like this.
Thanks.
Are you thinking of expanding this range?
I'm kind of interested. So I started, started like a small online store just because I wanted to do more than just paintings. I've been, making paintings for a long time as well as murals. I think, as a creative, you want to make some different things, which is, I've really branched out in a lot of different areas in the last couple of years. And I wanted to start offering like small run, different things that I use in my everyday life. And so, the yoga collection is just like a nice collaboration with a really small brand in the States that are super ethical, zero waste, all sustainable, everything's handmade. The designs are great. So I was like, yes, let's do it. I think it's, it's just 100 pieces. So it's just small, and then it's done. And then maybe I'll do something else. Maybe we'll do it again. Maybe some pillows. I don't know if I can make as nice ones as yours. Yeah.
How do you find your life currently compared to when you were younger? Do you think you've evened out and become more mature?
Well, Ben Frost. Should we draw ourselves a graph of our lives? I mean, I don't think that, and I would say you would agree with me, that as artists, there's any sort of normal trajectory of like, oh, I was like young and silly and suddenly I became like an adult who is like, I don't know, driving a car that looks like a shoe and, having a baby.
Wears hats.
Someone who wears hats.
Yes.
Exactly. I think that I definitely like know myself a lot better than I did when I was younger. I'm more sure of who I am creatively, of the things that I want to talk about, or do or make, and like have less concerns about how I might be perceived, I think that's, but like I'm still going to be on a dance floor when I'm 80. Like I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm too old to go to the club. That's not going to happen.
Do you think though, do you think that as an artist, sometimes as you get older, you take less risks? I feel like I sometimes rest on my laurels because you know it works and then you continue that. Does that in any way happen with you?
Yeah, a little bit for sure. Like I think that I definitely, in the last couple of years, I think that's partly why I started to do some sound stuff, the dinner that I did, the outdoor sculptures, because I started to be like, am I just going to keep doing this same thing forever? And I definitely like, I don't know, I remember sort of feeling that in my past as well, where I was like, all of a sudden, this is the only thing I'm making all this work just in like galleries. I need to do something else.
It's almost like you need to reinvent your medium. In the same way for me, I'm looking at pillows and different types of prints and
exactly. Not even reinvent it, just expand it. Like where can you take this thing and slightly twist it and make it more exciting for you, maybe accessible in a different way, a part of a larger story.
So tell me more about your larger story. What's happening after Melbourne?
So after Melbourne, I have a commission that I'm doing in LA, which is another collaboration. And then, heading back to Mexico for a while. I want to do some more experimenting there, do some more projection animation stuff, maybe some sound as well. I have a big project happening next year in New York. That's slowly coming together, and then a few other things that are not definitive enough to talk about, but I hear at the end of each program you have a little question you like to ask your guests. What's your latest Frost World problem?
Yes, well, thank you for being on the program and thank you for asking me.
Thank you for having me. Answer the question.
You're welcome. My Frost World problem. I am currently living in an apartment and I'm wishing and hoping so hard to get a little doggy.
A little tiny dog?
Now, my favorite type of dog is a corgi. And the kind of corgi I'd love has a lovely big bushy bottom, little twerks,
A little bubble butt.
and it to be a corgi. And I've already got an idea or a name for it. I'm going to call it Princess.
I think it's perfect.
And I'll take little Princess out for walks, feed Princess little treats. But no, I live in an apartment. I cannot have such a thing. How about you? What's your Frostwall problem?
I don't know if my Frostwell problem is as good as that, but recently, I generally, when I'm on a plane, always have a vegan or vegetarian meal. I do not eat meat on a flight because I'm particular when I do eat meat, what I eat. And my recent Frostwell problem is that they always give you gluten-free bread. And I'm not gluten-free. And gluten-free bread on a plane is like a little rock. It's disgusting. Anyway, that's my Frostwell problem.
That's
recently.
Certainly something to think about. So thanks so much, Vexta. It's been great having you.
Thank you so much for having me, Frosticle.
See you on the flip side.